Welcome to the Food Professor Podcast, the official podcast of the Cial Innovation Trade Show coming up in Montreal. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm the Food Professor, Sylvain Charlebois.
Our guest back on the show for a second visit, very popular guest, Michael Graydon, Chief Executive Officer, FHCP, Food, Health, and Consumer Products, the leading voice in uniting companies large and small that provide access to food, health, and consumer products Canadians rely on every day. I mean, it's a very familiar name. I'm sure many people listening will know his name or the organization. It's really got its hand on the pulse of manufacturing and regulation, commercial trade. Michael is also the chair of the Grocery Code of Conduct, which exemplifies the respect I think the industry has on both sides of the table for Michael. And by the way, of course, we'll be Karen Proud, the president, will be our guest at Cial. Now, Sylvain, you know, as I was listening to Michael, it reminded me of something that another Michael once said. Michael Medline, he says, "Well, I agree about 70% of what you say, but that's a pretty high number for me." So I think you and Michael haven't always agreed on everything, but you can always count on him for a thoughtful, respectful dialogue about any issue related to food business, right?
Absolutely. With Michael Graydon, I suspect it's over 70%. I mean, because as you know, Michael, I've always had a soft spot for food manufacturing, and I think he's doing a fantastic job. He represents a very important node of the food industry, and he gets it, and he's a great ambassador for that sector. I mean, he's doing a great job, and him and I, we've been on a few panels together, and it's always fun. It's always because you know why? Because he knows I'm comfortable with him, and I know he's comfortable with me. It works out always well.
Now, as we did last time Michael was on, we have his, let's call the counterpart, the other side of the coin from Retail Council of Canada. We have Kim Furlong making her debut on the podcast coming up as well in a couple of weeks. So we'll get both Michael's and his manufacturing and his take, and then we'll also get Kim and her take from the retailer's perspective.
I've not met yet, by the way.
Yeah, I was hoping that was actually going to happen in Cial, but she's actually in Washington today talking to her counterparts in the U.S. and just the schedule didn't mix up. So I'm sure we'll make that happen sooner than later. So you and I were talking off mic. I think this is one of the rare occasions that we're both somewhere else. Where are you, and what are you doing?
Yeah, so I'm in Ottawa. I'm actually meeting with some MPs tomorrow. Before my testimony, I'm actually testifying tomorrow before the committee on procedures and House Affairs. Boring.
Oh,
boring. Yeah, and this is my 27th testimony, but it is my first that's non-ag or food, if you will.
And you're in person. And you're in person, which is a bigger deal, right?
And of course, I'm also meeting with the Cattle Association in the afternoon as well, because they're based out of here in Ottawa. But over lunch, I'm actually testifying. You know why I'm testifying?
Why?
Because my column in La Presse, my 25-year column in La Presse that I wrote voluntarily, I was never paid, was paused a few weeks ago. I got a phone call from François Cardinal, and he told me that they weren't comfortable with comments I made on X and Facebook as a concerned citizen about how media is biased towards food news, hardly blaming any policies coming from Ottawa. And I've been dealing with media for 25 years, and I have seen a bit of a shift in recent years. So I wrote that on Facebook and X. With most media, I still deal with them, but with La Presse, they didn't like that at all. So they actually paused my column for how long, I don't know. But so a lot of people call me. I mean, it was posted on Facebook, and I didn't make an announcement on X. You wouldn't believe, Michael, the number of emails, DMs I receive. I couldn't believe it. I actually wrote my note on the plane from Calgary back to Montreal. By the time I landed, I had tons of messages. Like I didn't realize how much I was read. Like after 25 years, and
well, you know, But
I think it's the reason that people really got upset with, and frankly, I have a lot of respect for La Presse. I mean, it's a great paper. It's just right now I am frankly concerned. I mean, I do, and it's not La Presse's fault. I mean, it's the program's fault. I mean, when you talk to a reporter, 70% of that salary is covered by the tax credit program.
Well, you know, it's interesting. It's interesting you say that because most people think of the CBC as the recipient of government largesse, the taxpayer dollars.
It's a crown. It's a crown corporation. Yeah,
and they're not. Of course, they're not wrong, but it's not singularly the only recipient in the media world of government funds. And La Presse gets significant government funds as well, right?
So each reporter in Canada, the employer, 70% of salaries are covered by the tax credit program. 70% of salaries. And La Presse is a non-for-profit. Le Devoir is a non-for-profit. They get even more money as well from the government. Now, honestly, personally, I don't know what your feelings are, but I don't really mind seeing the government supporting our media because they need the help. The problem that we have right now, and again, it's not necessarily the media's fault, it's because it is a partisan issue. So some parties, I would tell you which one, would end the program should they get into power. And everyone knows that. So obviously it's a problem. And Peter Menzies, the former editor-in-chief of the Calgary Herald, he retired. So he was in the business for 40 years. He retired a few years ago, but his focus is media integrity. And he called me up after it happened, and I mean, the guy is brilliant. Like he knew exactly what happened. Like I was a little bit, I was taken aback by the whole issue because I wasn't expecting this at all. But he said, "Listen, this is not the first time. It's going to happen again, but this is a problem." And Trudeau government really put in place this program that was ill-designed because right now we're stuck with it. And that's why there is a bias towards liberal policies. Let's face it, there is a bias. And you can't get out of that bias. His solution would be to support consumption, not production. So instead of actually giving tax credits to employers, you just shift things around and give tax credits to consumers and let them decide who they want to support, and they get tax credits for that. And to me, when he said that, when he told me that, it made a whole lot of sense, you know, because right now, I mean, La Presse, like think about it. Why would they want readers? Like what's the incentive to actually have readers au lieu pushing a narrative, if you will?
Interesting.
It's true. They made $9 million last year. They made a profit of $9 million. And they got $15 million in subsidies. It's crazy.
Well, you know, we'll talk about this a little later, but I don't know if that's going to get worse or better now that the Carney government is a majority government. So we can talk about that and other issues around the political developments.
Well, with the testimony, I actually expect things to be much calmer and more rational, to be honest. It was a bit of a gong show, Michael, with committees. And this is where things are going to change a lot with the majority. A lot of people are saying, it's not going to change anything. Actually, it will.
Interesting.
I think, so, you know, people like Rachel Gilmore won't be invited again because, I mean, there were some people that were invited, and you do wonder why, but now things are going to be a little bit more rational. And tomorrow I don't expect as much of not a circus, but I do expect good questions coming from MPs. Well,
there you go. There's a strong statement for the integrity of the political system. There you go. Right there. Yeah. I'm in Vancouver. I'm in now sunny. It was rainy yesterday. Chilly Vancouver. Actually, I think it's actually might be a little warmer in Ottawa where you are.
It's 10 degrees here. What's the temperature there?
It's the same. It's cool. It's chilly here. It's very cold, unseasonably cold this week, but I think that won't last. Anyway, that's the weather. I spent the morning with David Long, who's been on the podcast before. The
former guest,
former guest and the president of the Greater Vancouver Food Bank. Listen, if politicians are looking for answers, a new model that is helping to feed Canadians, we know the demand is going up, not down, and provide actual solutions. They could chase their tails, is my conclusion after spending, it's not much different than I had it before, but it's more articulated in my brain, so to speak. You know, they could chase their tails with government-run grocery stores, which is a very, so to speak, conventional solution to a very tough problem. Or they can do this actual innovation work that David is doing here. And it's, you know, let me just tell you, the answer for how to help is here in Vancouver. And, you know, I can talk more about that later, but for my morning with the
Greater Vancouver Tell us, what did you see today? I'm curious.
Well, I mean, it basically it's run like a business. And as he said in our interview, they no longer accept donations from consumers. He said they were spending $50,000 a year just throwing the stuff out that they got from consumers. Yeah. So they only accept donations. And then they shifted from 20% fresh to over now. He was 70% when we talked to him last time. It's over 75 to 80% fresh food for people in his network. And he said, you know, it's just interesting, right? He said, listen, you can go to a Dollarama and get a $1 box of Kraft dinner. You don't need me for that. What you need me for is to make sure the abundance of food that's created, and sometimes the overabundance, finds its way to the right place and in the right way. So, I mean, he's doing things like freeze drying fruit. He gets a container of fruit. You know, you can't give it away fast enough, so to speak, but he freeze dries it and creates nutrition for hundreds and thousands of families. It's just, you know, I could go on and on about, you know, he had a container of mandarins, not the kind of mandarin that's in Ottawa, by the way. He had a container of mandarin and turned it into a fresh pressed juice. And it was, and gave that to the people. And it was just fantastic. And so anyway, you know, over and over again, I have to say, the solution. It's a
great food bank, and I'm not even sure if we should call it food bank anymore. It's an enterprise.
It's certainly not in any conventional sense. It's not. Yeah. So I think it deserves a lot more scrutiny.
A food rescuing enterprise, absolutely.
It's a rebrand. He gave me a pin. I'm going to give it to you and say, oh, there's my pin for my visit to the Greater Vancouver
good
Food
stuff.
Bank. And if anyone's listening and feels like they want to donate to something that's actually working, that's the place to go. So. That's one of the things I'm doing here in Vancouver. All right, well, let's get to the news. Where should we start? Well, let's start with Carney's majority government. So, boy, the Liberal tent is very big with some of these floor crossers who's kind of comes with not so, you know, like these ideas. But anyway, it's welcome. Terrebonne, I guess, was the final straw. They now have a majority government. And there's a couple of things they announced concurrent with that, one of which you wanted to talk about in terms of the fuel tax break, which I think runs until the fall. But you and I talked about this, and it's this being the cost of fuel, and its direct impact on Canadians, and particularly those struggling to you know, put food on the table. That food, so to speak, is going in the gas tank now. Yeah. So talk about that. Are you happy with the developments? And
I think it's going to help. Obviously, consumers who are shopping around, struggling to actually get bargains. So if you're actually driving around, it's going to cost you less money. So that's good news for industry. The question I'm getting a lot is that will it make a difference with food retail prices? Not necessarily. It's 4 cents on diesel. Farmers already gets credits when they spend money on diesel, so they're covered. It's everything else basically. It's going to probably make a difference a little bit, but because they only eliminate one tax, not all of them. So
sure. There's still provincial taxes, for example.
Mr. Carney did listen to Pierre Poilievre, but to a certain extent. So he could have gone farther, and if he would have gone farther, probably we would have seen some difference, but I'm not expecting food prices to actually move as a result of the policy. But I mean, we'll take all the help we can get. So I think it was a good move on his behalf.
Well, and to your point, it's really about Canadians being able to afford the food that's on their table rather than lowering the price, so to speak, this one thing. So, hey, listen, it's a great initiative. Now, you mentioned earlier in the show that you thought the majority government changes the dynamic a bit in the testimony, for example. Do you see any changes that you see some opportunity in the ag files, trade files? Carney's kind of been acting like a majority government anyway. in some ways, but do you see any material difference?
Yeah, my biggest concern is that I don't see a whole lot of evidence that ag and food is a priority. That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so with his mega projects, and I mean, every time I hear him, I don't hear a lot of food and ag. And Heath McDonald, the Minister of Agriculture, is there. We know that Cody Blois is in the PMO. I haven't seen any evidence of anything so far.
A little bit. I mean, the trade junkets to China and India, to me, are some evidence of some trade focus on, canola and other things that are improving, right? There's a little bit.
But I don't know if you've seen the CFIB, the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses, actually came out with a study today showing that Canada is actually losing more businesses than seeing new businesses. We have an entrepreneurial drought in Canada, and a lot of the businesses that are disappearing are in the food space. And so that's certainly a concern. So how do we actually get people back? How do we get entrepreneurs back excited about ag and food? And so that's certainly a concern. And of course, RBC also had a report today showing that we've actually seen this exodus of cash, of investments, more than $1 trillion in the last 10 years. So in 2025, we did see a reversal. So we're starting to see more investments, but obviously we need more. And RBC suggests that there's actually a lot of opportunities in ag and food, over $200 billion we can invest in ag and food. So banks are sending out a message to the government, and let's see whether or not Ottawa is listening.
Well, let's see if the banks can take their own advice, because as you hear from Michael Graydon and later in the interview, they're the last people to loan money to the entrepreneurs. So let's take that with a healthy dose of salt when RBC is kind of...
FCC did set up a $2 billion fund with venture capital funds.
Great.
So a few months ago, we heard that. Hopefully that will reap rewards, but we haven't seen anything yet.
Okay. Let's move on to a couple of grocery store issues or things in the news. First of all, this inaccurate scales issue seems to be back again. And for those listening, the source of this seems to be weighing product with the packaging versus without the packaging. And, I've seen all kinds of grocers' names come up. It doesn't seem like it's a singular operational issue.
No.
Now, you said something, and I recall last time we talked about this, because we talked about this last year, that really the issue was in not the CFIA inspection, but in the measurement. So
Measurement Canada.
Talk a bit more about that.
So first of all, it's the CBC, and again, we need media to actually come up with these fraudulent cases. We saw that with maple syrup, and now we're seeing with scales. The scaling issue is an ongoing issue. In fact, I actually calculated before the show that if you actually spread the problem across the country nationally, looking at what CBC has sampled, you're looking at an 800 million problem. So Canadians may potentially have been overcharged $800 million. It's anywhere between $150 million to $800 million for the year, looking at media expenditures. So it's a bit of money.
It's a bit of money. Now, it's not about inaccuracy, so to speak, of the tools, right? Like, it seems like a process issue.
Yeah.
So tell me how Measurement Canada, they would come in and inspect the process or the tool.
Well, so there's a couple of things. So it's how the scale is accurate and how you operate it as well.
Well,
so they would actually, they look at both, and the CBC story. They only talk about the CFI because they got this whistleblower from the CFI, but they forgot to mention that Measurement Canada is also responsible for the accuracy of scales. Personally, I'm a little troubled by the story because I think grocers are showing a lack of rigor, and they should know that they need to be a little bit careful with scales as much as possible. It's a sensitive issue. The problem is that it makes the entire industry look bad, and people will start buying scales, $15, $20 at home, and they'll start measuring, and frankly, people are going to start taking pictures, they potentially will see some class action lawsuit. It's just ugly. Yet again, another opportunity that grocers could avoid. This is money. This is money. This is fraud. You're overcharging. And so the one advice I could give to people, if you actually go into your kitchen, you scale your product, take the product back, and if you're in Quebec, if it's $15 or less, you'll get it for free because that's an inaccurate price. And elsewhere in Canada, it's $10 because of the price inaccuracy policy that RCC has implemented many, many years ago.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I would certainly recommend that, but I certainly would recommend to grocers, please get your act together, man. Jeez.
Seems like an opportunity for that process to be dramatically
$800 million.
improved.
It's a lot of money.
Speaking of grocers, so Empire made an acquisition in the Quebec market.
I assume you've never been to Méran.
I've never heard of it. I've never been there, and I've been to a lot of places. I'm like, who
4
are these
stores.
guys?
It's not big.
What do you know about it? What do you know about it?
It's similar to Costco, but you don't necessarily need a membership. So, but the store looks like Costco, and I think what Sobeys has in mind is to start a discount banner in Quebec, basically, because they don't have one. There's Super C by Metro, there's Maxi by Loblaws, and Maxi is similar to No Frills, but IGA, it's been just clobbered by the competition. Sobeys, they have no solution in Quebec. They have no discount banners in Quebec. So my guess, the reason why they bought Méran, and of course there are some issues, financially there. I think that's what they want to do. They actually want to launch a small discount banner and then expand it across the province. But it is going to be difficult because the Sobeys Empire, the Sobeys network has a lot of independents, family-owned grocers, and I don't know how they'll feel when they see a Méran or a discount broker or a discount banner run by Sobeys that actually is implemented next to them, next to their store. So it's going to be. I suspect that Pierre Saint-Laurent is having some really interesting conversation with his franchisees in Quebec as a result of the acquisition.
Well, what I thought was interesting is the last 2 acquisitions under Michael Medline, which was Longo's
Farm Boy and Longo's.
Farm Boy. They were acquired to be left alone. Basically, don't change the format. We love the format, and then you get all the benefits. He talked about this in our interview of getting better real estate, more efficient.
I don't think that's going to be the case with Méran.
It doesn't sound like it, right? It sounds like this is an acquisition to expand.
It needs tender love and care. It needs change, and frankly, I was wondering, okay, Sobeys, that's interesting, but I don't see another avenue for them. Why would you buy Méran? And it was a really struggling chain. Well, it's 4 stores. It's not a big chain. It's 4 stores, but it was a struggling
not
chain.
Not a big acquisition.
They were squeezed between Costco and Walmart, really.
No doubt. Not a place anyone really wants to be. That's a tough place to be.
So Sobeys will have to figure that one out, and of course you can't just leave it alone.
Right. Update on here's another group I didn't know really existed, Colabor, and they just got they just got bought out of bankruptcy by an interesting suitor.
Yeah, so Pierre-Carl Pelado is a billionaire. He owns Québécois mainly, and he owns the Alouettes, the football club in Montreal. He was after Transat, anyways. He's shopping around, and I honestly, when I heard the news, I wasn't overly surprised. He has no experience in food, zero. Right. Other than eating and enjoying a good meal. He's a Quebecer, and he's got some financial capacity there. But Colabor, for people who don't know what Colabor is, for Quebec, I would say it's a too big to fail scenario.
Right.
because Colabor competes with GFS, with Cisco. But the uniqueness of Colabor is that it's a network of many Quebec-based SMEs that rely heavily on Colabor to get their products through into restaurants in Quebec and the Atlantic as well. And without Colabor, they would go bankrupt. I mean, we're not talking about one company. We're talking about hundreds of companies that actually rely on Colabor. So to see a Quebecer, because if I was concerned that GFS or Cisco would buy them out, because if they buy them out, they would they would close them. But with Pierre Capello, he's committed to it. He wants to make it work, even though the company was really badly managed. It was cyber attacked last year, cost them a bunch of money. The leadership was weak. Now they're actually starting to change things for the better. So it is good news for a lot of small companies in Quebec. So I was glad to hear that.
All right. Oh, by the way, staying in the grocery sector, I don't know if you saw the announcement, John Bayless, who I just interviewed John in his role. I just interviewed him on the Voice of Retail. Like, he was my first interview of 2026 in his role as the president of Mastermind Toys that had just come out of bankruptcy. He was very excited about that. But now he's finished playing around. He's finished playing games. He just got announced as big shoes to fill. John is very, very competent and very experienced. He's taken over Metro for their VP supply chain from Carmen Fortino, the legend. Basically a legend. So big shoes to fill and a few challenges as well to iron out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that's a good grab for Eric Laflèche for sure. So it'll be interesting to watch. Metro, it's gone through some headaches with Toronto last year, if you remember. And of course there was a strike affecting produce in Quebec in recent weeks. They had to go through that as well. So, when it comes to supply chains, they've had their fair share of challenges. And so John's arrival is absolutely going to be critical. And I suspect that it's going to make things even stronger for Metro.
Let's shift gears. Let's talk about McDonald's. You had a visit to the headquarters, and we're going to have the president of McDonald's on next season. She has a very, very busy calendar, so we're going to have her join us in the fall on the show. But talk about what's going on with McDonald's and energy drinks. I know that there's several QSRs that got into energy drinks and actually got into a little bit of trouble with a little too much energy in the drinks. But what's going on with McDonald's?
Yeah, McDonald's is actually going into energy drinks. Now, I'm not sure if it's actually impacting Canada per se, but I thought it was interesting. And frankly, when you hear that, to me, I don't know about you, but it means that McDonald's wants to cater to a younger crowd. And so, because they have the coffee at $1 and they're getting people hooked on that. But at the same time, you're not getting the younger crowd, which may not be drinking coffee. So I thought it was a really interesting twist. And it's going to be interesting also to see what price they're selling the energy drinks too. I mean, these drinks can be pretty darn expensive.
Well, when I read that, the first thing that popped into my mind is, energy drinks have replaced other products, other high margin products at lots of convenience stores, right? I mean, if you go to the convenience stores, it is the domain of energy drinks. So McDonald's deciding to get into energy drinks is not good news for the C-store sector.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with that. And so so it's going to be interesting to see how things go. But you're seeing that McDonald's is trying to adapt to a new market. And the market is really the sluggish economy is not rewarding QSR as it used to. And they're figuring that one out.
So you wrote an op-ed about the K-shaped economy. And for those listeners who don't or maybe aren't familiar, one of the big consulting agencies described their economists described an economy where there are big winners and big losers. I mean, physically, it's like a K. And I tend to agree. I think lost in that, my perspective is, sometimes the consumer is described as a resilient consumer. I think that's a complete myth. There's lots of, and we have the food bank numbers to back that up. But at the bottom of the K is, people who are working, an incredible amount of people who are working and are still going to food banks. At the top of the K, and you go into some of these neighborhoods in Vancouver, you can see the tip top of that K. So talk about your op-ed and what you're thinking.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been talking about this in the last few weeks in front of crowds. I was talking to a group in Halifax yesterday, last night, of course, in Ontario. There was a fundraiser. I spoke to agrologists, and I've been talking about the K-shaped economy, and I've been looking for evidence, like database evidence to see exactly what's going on. And I've been crunching some numbers from Statistics Canada on salaries and how much people are earning and the proportion that the middle class has. And to me, I don't know how you define what the middle class is. Well, how I define the middle class is the 60% of revenues earned by households. So that's the chunk, okay? And so if you go back 10 years in 2015, you go from there and you try to assess how that 60% has evolved since then, and it's shrinking. So the middle class is shrinking. We're talking about 4 or 5%, and the top 20% is increasing, is growing. It's up to 23, 24%. And of course, as you can imagine, the low 20%, the poorest, well, that portion is shrinking. So again, it's the same number of people occupying a lesser share of the revenues generated, essentially. So that is absolutely an indication that a K-shaped economy is emerging in Canada. And from a food perspective, it's a pretty darn dangerous thing to see. Especially on the eve of being at Cial, how do you innovate, when you see a slow erosion of the middle class and you see the top 20% becoming richer, and this is why beef is so expensive, Michael. I mean, this is why lamb is plus 8%. People are still buying it. People are still buying crab and lobster. Okay, and people are visiting food banks. What's going on? So the lower 20% are exposed to the effects of the higher 20% because they're putting pressure on food prices. Demand is up, so prices are going up. The lower 20% can't keep up. They can't keep up. The K-shaped economy makes it a nightmare for any innovators out there. So when I'm going to be at Cial in a couple of weeks, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to ask people, how do you deal with the market as it is right now? Do you go rich, poor, in between? And in between, they're being squeezed right now.
Well, we've often talked about, it's a fascinating question because at Cial, you and I have talked about how innovation sometimes trends to be very value-added, too value-added perhaps, because there's just not a market for it. It creates too an expensive a product. And, is there going to be enough innovation so that there's food and products created for all Canadians, not just the upper echelon?
Essentially, it's much easier to innovate and think of new ideas when you have a solid, growing middle class. And when people ask me, why isn't it all coming to Canada? Why isn't little coming to Canada? Well, there's your answer. The middle class is getting poorer. But if I were Mr. Carney with a majority government, that would be a priority. How do you actually, regenerate wealth in that class?
Let's get to our great interview with Michael Graydon and get his perspectives. And let's hear from him right now. And then we'll be back with one more story to wrap up the episode.
So we have a special guest joining us this week, a person who has been on our show before, a great leader for the food industry, and in particular food manufacturing. Michael Graydon is joining us today. How are you, Michael?
Very good, Sylvain. Michael, very nice to be with you both today.
Welcome back.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're the leader of FHCP. That's the acronym often used in our industry. Could you tell us more about what is FHCP for listeners who may not be aware of your group?
Sure. It's a trade association. About 80% of the products that you see center store in a grocery store and a pharmacy in Canada are made by our members. A bit of a unique organization in this sector. Most of the other trade associations in the food sector tend to be smaller organizations, one or two person shops, focus very much on the government relations side of things, trying to influence advocacy sort of through the minister's office down into bureaucracy. We're much larger. We have almost 40 employees in our organization, but we're also very centric in the regulatory side, where we have food scientists and we consumer health specialists as regulatory specialists working directly with the bureaucracy, especially within Health Canada, trying to influence change. And I think as we're going through some fairly dramatic changes within government today, having that strong focus on the regulatory relationship is proving to be very, very helpful for the industry in regards to moving some things forward. So I think we are truthfully the voice of the industry, and we take that responsibility very wholeheartedly and try to be as progressive with government as we can, but also do our very best to try to get our points of view across to the industry, to the public, to government in what is in the best interest of food and consumer health manufacturing in Canada.
Mm-hmm. We've seen in recent months some great wins in food manufacturing in Canada, and I'm including Coca-Cola in Brampton, Mars, Kraft Heinz in Montreal. I mean, those are positive signs, of course. From your vantage point, how would you describe the true state of the Canadian food manufacturing industry right now in Canada?
Well, it's kind of a tale of two stories, I think. The large manufacturers, and you're right, there's been some fabulous capital investments. And if you even go back a few more months, Ferrero made a $500 million investment in their Brantford, Ontario plant. McCain has invested in the past year almost $800 million in their plants across Canada. So the large manufacturers, I think, are betting on Canada, and they're making those significant investments that are necessary. And there's a couple of reasons for it. Some of it is to improve efficiencies and operating expenses. Others are to de-risk some of the trade issues that exist with the United States, because some of them in the past have had more of a North American supply chain model and trying to get more self-sufficiency in their manufacturing here in Canada. The other side of it's the small to medium players, and there's lots of them. There's probably about 5,000 small to medium manufacturers in the food sector in Canada, and they're struggling. And it's a challenge because it's hard to have access to capital. The traditional banks and those sort of capital financing mechanisms, they're very risk averse, and the food industry has been seen as being a challenge. They're struggling with the regulatory onslaught that is hitting them and the cost implications. They're struggling with the consolidation of retail because they're not having as much accessibility, especially to the large players, as they change some of their strategies around categories. So it is challenging. And I think it's important that we continue to ensure that the large manufacturers continue to spend, because when you're spending $500 million or 800 million or 250 million, it's creating jobs, it's creating opportunity. But the small to medium manufacturers are also critically important to the fabric as well. And we've got to make sure that they come along for this ride. And that's where government, I think, has a real strong role to play in ensuring that that sector has the same sort of opportunity as do some of the large manufacturers here in the country.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that governments could do to really support and help the smaller players, as you mentioned?
Well, some of it starts at just the regulatory rigor that exists in this country, and regulation is very important, and it ensures health and safety. But you can have too much of a good thing, and the level of regulatory requirements are exhaustive. Our industry probably is paying somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 billion a year in regulatory compliance.
Yikes.
that is expensive, and it creates infrastructure and understanding within these organizations to try to comply. Large manufacturer can build an infrastructure, they can have regulatory people in-house, whereas a small to medium manufacturer, those aspects are difficult for them to be able to do. So getting the regulatory component reduced significantly through modernization and red tape reduction, I think would be important. And the other is looking for opportunities for access to capital at reasonable rates of interest. And, if you're a small to medium manufacturer and you're having to go to venture capital, private equity, there's usually a significant cost to that, and not always in the best interest of the operator. But if government can make more money available, not for free, but at really, really, it's preferable sort of rates of interest, then I think it would be helpful. I think the other is our tax policies in this country need to change. Not only from a consumer perspective, we pay way too much taxes, but from a business perspective, I think government needs to come to the realization the lower the tax, the more the capital investment and the spending and growth. And if we can get it down in that 10% range, I think it can be very, very lucrative for these organizations to make investments. And, the most recent policy by the feds in regards to accelerated capital write-offs, all those sort of things are good, pointing in the right direction of creating opportunity. But we've got to have access to capital to be able to have the write-offs and make them work. And that's the challenge that a small to medium manufacturer is having to deal with, unfortunately, right now.
Before I throw it back to Michael, are you seeing players leaving Canada right now? And what's driving that? Bureaucracy is probably one thing, but are there other things that are driving some people out of our country right now?
No, we're not really seeing organizations leave fundamentally, but what we are seeing is some SKU reductions where organizations are rationalizing down their portfolio. And I think it's a couple of things. One is the regulatory environment, no question, especially in our consumer health side of the business where it's pre-market approvals from a regulatory perspective. Man, you go into the valley of death on profitability and margins, and by the time you come out of it, it's a challenge to make money. And so you're seeing some really interesting products that are available in other jurisdictions around the world. They just don't make the Canadian market. And there's also the complexity of drug scheduling where you have to get approval for these products in every single province. Like just the cost implications of that alone prohibit the innovation of these new products coming. The other is, I think it's really about the consolidation of retail. Yes, retail is very competitive in this country. There's no question about it. But the consolidation has had an impact in regards to accessibility of shelf for some manufacturers. And I think a lot of the retailers now, the playbook is pay to play. So if you want to be with us, then you're going to have to make a significant contribution, and whether that be listing fees, promotional activities. But there's also a movement of SKU rationalization and category narrowing so that, private label has become a big part of the retailer's game. And most of them are really, really good at it.
Michael, I want to do a follow-up question on your regulatory burden comments, and I'd love to put it in some kind of context. I mean, every district, the United States, Europe, the EU has regulatory burden. If Canada is just for an index, if Canada is a 10 of regulatory burden, where's the US and where's the EU? Like where in relation to the rest of the world are we? And I guess that sets a path about where we could go or not go. What do you think about that? It's kind of a subjective question, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the U.S. is evolving quite significantly. There's new leadership, and the FDA has changed dramatically under JFK. So there's we don't quite know where the U.S. is at this particular point. If you look at Europe, I would suggest Europe is sort of coming down the scale. And I think there has been a focus on regulatory modernization and a recognition that we need regulation that's going to stimulate business, but not at the expense of health and safety of the consumer.
Sure.
And so I think there's that oversight, and you can see it in areas like the UK. They're starting to have some very significant changes to their regulatory environment. And Europe has gone through that too. And, there's other areas like around sustainability and packaging where they've gone very, very aggressive in regards to the regulatory situation. But that's, I would like to classify as catch up, because for many, many years, there wasn't the focus on the regulatory environment to the extent that it needed to be. And so we've now got to make some changes, create some innovation in packaging to be able to align with them. But I think that's all in the best interest of climate and all the best interest of the environment going forward. And I think we as an industry have a responsibility to take some action to make sure that we are part of the solution and not a continued part of the problem.
Let's shift gears and talk about trade policy. So, we are in some kind of renegotiation or relook at CUSMA, and it is likely we may, as a country, be faced with some harsh decisions around trade-offs to be made. How exposed are Canadian-based manufacturers to U.S. trade policy? And here I'm thinking not just about trade of final goods, but I'm thinking of ingredients. Some ingredients, lots comes from China and India. But how do your members feel about the end? Who knows? Maybe even the end of CUSMA.
Yeah, it's a scary thought that the free trade agreement would disappear completely. We are very reliant on the United States, and I think many of our members have developed North American supply chain strategies where they'll make a portion of the product for North America here in Canada, and they ship across the border, and vice versa. Other SKUs are coming up from manufacturing facilities in the United States. So I think it's going to force organizations to really look at where their capital will be deployed. And I think that's one of the challenges right now with a number of companies are keeping their hands in the pockets until they understand kind of where this thing will settle out. Do I invest in the United States to support my American customers, or do I continue to advance my capital investments in Canada and export? So, one of the challenges in our industry is you need an element of certainty for good planning. And it's very volatile right now. I think the good news, if you take all the noise away from Truth Social and Trump and what he goes on about, and you just listen to the Greers of the world and you listen to the Minister LeBlancs of the world, I think there is a really good path forward. And I think if you review around Christmas time, all the consultations in the U.S. and Washington, about 80% were highly in favor of continued free trade with Canada and Mexico, because it is very important to the economy of the United States. It's Trump's toolbox, this tariff situation that he feels is critically important. But I think saner minds will prevail through this whole process, and we'll end up with something. I think while Prime Minister Carney is working hard to diversify trade in our sector, that's really difficult to do because, if you make cookies in Canada, they make cookies in England, they make cookies in Europe, they make cookies everywhere else. It's not necessarily a commodity that is got the potential to export significantly. Commodities, yes, our beef, our canola, our wheat, our barley, absolutely. But finished goods, not as good an opportunity. So it's critical, I think, for us to try to continue to influence a successful outcome on the free trade agreement. If there are some elements of tariffs put in place, at least we know where they are, and you can plan accordingly as you move forward. what we had to endure over the last couple of years with some of the tariffs the retaliatory tariffs in Canada, it was really, really hard on the manufacturers in Canada,
Sure.
very hard in their planning. It was really hard on their margins.
Well, as you said, so many of the businesses, and not just in the food sector, are on the sidelines, right? They're keeping their powder dry. Their uncertainty is just calcifying investment in some way. And for those that do want to invest, where do you think there's opportunities to invest? There's this, the constant pull around productivity, automation, AI. You mentioned sustainability in terms of packaging, for example. If you had $1, if your members had one more dollar to spend on whatever, where would they spend that to get growth? What's going to enhance that productivity out of that kind of set of options for them?
I think it's really in advanced manufacturing and getting to the point where the facilities that you have are less reliant on people. And that's not that we don't want to create jobs in our sector, but we employ across the sector about 350,000 people. There's about 50,000 job vacancies today.
Right.
And the inability to attract people to work in these manufacturing facilities has necessitated the need to find other ways to be able to compensate for that. The good news is it usually tends to create better, higher paying jobs, though not as many of them. But it helps us eclipse this void of these 40 or 50,000 vacancies that exist. I think AI will continue to be a vehicle. I think we're all learning how to use it and learning its value. But I see that as part of the process. But if you can, if you're a manufacturer like Kraft Heinz and Montreal, and you can increase your line speed by 1 minute, like it can be quite extraordinary in regards to the cost implications. So I think that advanced manufacturing mindset, put the money into the machines that have the ability to increase your efficiencies, because cost is always going to be a variable that needs to be managed in our industry, because most of these companies are public companies, and, creating shareholder value. You can see how our world over the last year or two has changed, with this company being bought by this company and these brands being bought by this company. Everybody is chasing shareholder value through that process and aligning their strategies to the most effective way. And it's no different on the manufacturing floor, making sure you are as efficient as possible and maximize the potential of your earnings through those efficiencies.
Last question, and then I'm going to pass the mic back to Sylvain. And it's a kind of a funny question, because you're in front of testifying in front of the federal government fairly often, as people in your role tend to do. But if there's one thing, if you had their full attention for, you and Prime Minister Carney are in the Air Canada lounge together, and you got 1 minute as you're taking that terrible elevator in Pearson, do this one thing for our sector. What would that one thing be?
I think it's keep the momentum on regulatory modernization and red tape reduction. Today, it is very much the mantra of this government. But remember, as it transitions from the minister's office down into the bureaucracy are not voted in. They are there election after election after election. And in many cases, there's the mindset of this too shall pass. And it's making sure that the pressure stays very, very hard on them to go about this sort of regulatory change. The minute he takes his foot off the gas pedal, then you will see a slowing of the momentum of change. And we need that, I think, in this country to remain more competitive than we are currently today, and to alleviate some of those costs. I think the only other thing, because I said that really fast, because it's a very slow elevator at Pearson, is get this interprovincial stuff figured out. Like, my goodness, it is a challenge in this country, and it's
it's not the Prime Minister's job. I don't lay that at the feet of the federal government. I mean, mostly it's the provincial. Some maybe, but mostly the provincial leaders got to do it, right?
It's a combination, but part of the leadership as the prime minister is to get the premiers of the provinces engaged to a point where we actually have reasonable response to this. It's just so far, it's just been, a little bit here, a little bit there. I think the Federation in Canada as it functions today is brilliant. But man, oh man, when it gets harder to trade in Canada than it does south of the border, you've got a fundamental systemic issue that needs to be fixed. And I think it's the Prime Minister's responsibility to continue to influence the premiers of the value that a true interprovincial free trade would have. And it's frustrating when you've got to take a load on a truck off at a particular province because the weight's too heavy and put it on another one, or get it onto another truck because the wheel size isn't right, or not able to send a technician to a plant because they don't have the credentials in that province. And just the labor mobility, all these things just create complexity. And it's unfortunate. And sometimes you got to fix your own backyard before you worry too much about fixing other parts across the street. And this is an opportunity where I think the federal government needs to also continue to work hard at influencing change.
You've been a key player in establishing the Grocer Code of Conduct. You, along with obviously Michael LeBlanc, former CEO at Sobeys. So we're almost we're 4 months in. So it was enforced officially on January 1st. Any feedback in terms of how things are working out so far?
Yeah, so far so good. I think, the first few months was really about getting people recruited to join the code. Obviously, the large retailers, it was a very public process. But then we needed to get all the large manufacturers. And again, that was fairly easy process to go through. But now we're going through all the small to medium enterprises across the country. And as you can imagine, they're very aware of the code. But I'm not sure they were all paying attention to the code. And now it's education time about what does it mean? How does it work? And going through that. So, I'm really, really excited about the momentum that we have in regards to registration. A good portion of the industry is now signed up. I'm really, really pleased with our adjudicator, Karen Proud. I think some suggested to us that we were looking for a unicorn. I didn't believe we were, but if we were, we found one. Yeah. And she has just been absolutely brilliant, I think, and just the infrastructure in such a short period of time that she's put in place, and I think is great. The code has now been transitioned to a new board, a board of members. The interim board has now finished its duties and moved back to its day job. I think they all did a really, really good job at getting us to where we are, but now it's really important to put it in the hands of the members. And we'll see. I think it behooves us all to understand what the consequences of noncompliance are. And the consequences could be a regulated code in the future if we don't play well in the sandbox. I'm not sure we all want that. And, governments can be good for some things. I don't think they're very good at running the grocery business in Canada. And I don't think we want them in the grocery business in Canada. So, my continued...
So you don't want Ottawa to run a chain of grocery stores? Wouldn't you want to deal with the government to sell stuff?
Not on my worst day. So it's just, and I think we've just got to continue to make sure that people fully understand what the consequences if we don't. And I think history's not on our side. You look at Australia and the UK have all gone to regulated. New Zealand didn't even go through the voluntary process. They went straight to regulated. Yep. But I think we have a really good opportunity to demonstrate to people that this industry can actually work effectively together and find an opportunity to be able to separate ourselves from the rest of the world. Behaviors do have to change. They're not great, and they haven't been. If they were good, then we wouldn't need a grocery code of conduct. But we did need a grocery code of conduct. Now it behooves us to play within the framework that we've all agreed to. And if we can do that, then I think a voluntary code can continue to be a success and actually have a positive impact on the industry and our abilities to continue to prosper on both sides, both retail and manufacturing.
One last question. For Canadians out there, whether or not they're part of the food industry or not, why should they care about the success of the grocery code of conduct?
Well, I think it creates a balance within the industry that gives it the stability that it needs to continue to grow. And this industry requires strong manufacturing, and strong manufacturing creates jobs and it feeds Canadians. And that's very important. And food sovereignty in this country is something that is critically important. And the grocery code brings that element of balance. On the other side, we need good retailers. We need strong retailers. And we're very fortunate in Canada. When you look at the set of retailers that we have the ability to work with, they're all really world class, and each a little bit different than the next in regards to where their strengths are. But I would put a company like Sobeys or Metro or Loblaws up against anybody else around the world. They're very, very good retailers. And we need strong retail in Canada. So to Canadians, I think understanding that this industry is vitally important. It puts food on our tables every day. It grows it, it manufactures it, and it sells it. And that environment, that ecosystem needs to function like a fine-tuned machine, but it has to function in a collaborative way in the best interest of the consumer. And that's what I believe the grocery code has the potential to do, is bring that ecosystem into better alignment than it was in the past, and getting back to partnerships, getting back to collaboration, trying to make that transition from transactional to actually creating value. And we have got ourselves into this transactional mindset within this industry. And I think the code can help transition us to that value creation. And that's where the consumer wins. They win with innovation. They win with unique products. They win on the innovation coming on sustainability and packaging. And hopefully they win with regards to some stability within the framework of pricing. There are people in government think that, the code of conduct is the panacea of all in regards to affordability. It was never designed that way, ever, ever, ever. But, and Sylvain, I know you've said this publicly on more than one occasion, if it brings some stability to the industry, then some of those other elements can start to take place that will have a factor on affordability as we go forward. But, this thing's been on the plate for over 10, 12, 14 years. Well, 14 years ago, the word affordability wasn't discussed to the extent that it is today. And today it's in crisis, but there's so many other factors that have contributed to it. And this is not the silver bullet to fix it, but it can be one of the elements to contribute to bringing some stability back into our industry.
Michael Graydon, thank you so much for joining us on the Food Professor podcast today.
Oh, it's been a sincere pleasure. It's nice to be with both of you. And thanks for all the great work that you do with your podcast. I know it's very successful, but I must say I look forward to listening to your work on a regular basis. You have some very interesting guests coming, and you talk about some very important things that are impacting our industry. So thanks for everything that you do.
Thank you.
All right, we are back. I wanted to do a shout out to a couple things. Restaurants. So there's an article in the Wall Street Journal about, and Anthony Bourdain said this. He said, of everyone who works in a restaurant, you know what the most important role in that restaurant is? The dishwashers. He said, if you have an amazing dishwasher, if you conversely, if you don't have a great dishwasher, it's one of the hardest jobs in the restaurants, one of the most lowest paid. However, there's changes coming because, of course, with all the things that are going on in the States, the kind of people who want that job. I read this article and people are getting $60 $65,000 a year to be a dishwasher because it's a critical element of restaurants. So anyway, shout out to all the people who wash the dishes for when.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But at the RC show, you saw many companies selling automated dishwashers.
That's their choice. That's their choice. 50. It was mentioned that in the article. You could spend $20,000 for an automated dishwasher.
I gotta admit, I've never walked into restaurants and say, I want to meet the dishwasher.
It is the most pivotal. Next time we go out, we're going to go into somebody's kitchen. You watch how hard they work. You watch.
He's gonna have like water all over the place, mud everywhere, broccoli here.
Well, you know what I'm going to do? Next time I'm going to take you out to dinner and then say I have no money, and they're going to make us wash dishes to pay for dinner. And then we'll live in their
with the kind of restaurants you bring me to, I don't have a choice. I would have to work 70 hours just to pay for dessert.
Come on now. Now, I wanted to end on this great restaurant I visit. I always visit here, so I wanted to give them a quick shout out because it also ties into something you wanted to talk about. So I go to this tapas place, Spanish place here in Vancouver. It is called Como Taparia. It is a Michelin recommended place. And I've posted pictures before. They crack open a tin of bespoke sardines and give you a fork.
Sardines!
And I always get one for show and one to go. Here I am if you watch on YouTube, I got some. I had these last night. These are some of the best Spanish sardines I've ever had, and their food is so good. The people are amazing. Now you're talking about, we've had this whole bespoke tin seafood thing is a thing, right?
Think of sardines. It's the perfect protein source. Lots of calcium, lots of omega-3s, and there's a TikTok trend on sardines right now. A lot of people, some stores are running out of sardines. It's because of you, my friend. It's because of you. You started the TikTok trend.
I think that would be our guest, Charlotte Langley, who of course, with her Just Cans, nice cans, was early on in that. But there's no question. Twice a week at home, I crack open a nice can of sardines and make some toast and put them on toast. That's my lunch. So for all you out there who are not doing this, first of all, shout out to Vancouver restaurants. They are a little freaked out, actually, collectively. I've talked to a couple of them about the upcoming World Cup because, in Ontario, where the games are playing, the government is saying you can open up at 7 a.m., you can serve whenever you want, you can stay late. Like they're looking at it as a genuine opportunity to help that sector. It's a little more challenging here in Vancouver. You got to apply for permits, and I'm not clear why you need to do that. And they're a little freaked. They're excited. It should be a good summer in both of Canada's Vancouver and Toronto, two of Canada's biggest cities for our friends in the restaurant and entertainment sector. So shout out to them all. They're going to work hard, but they're excited. And I can tell you, I'm not coming to Vancouver or going to downtown Toronto in the month of June. You will not find me there. It's going to be tough. So anyway,
one last thing, Michael LeBlanc Tardif, Super Bowl champion, is now a baker in Montreal. He just bought a bakery, similar to his parents. His parents actually bought a bakery in 2009. Now he's just following his parents' footsteps. Just bought a bakery in Hochelaga Maisonneuve. It's a really hippie kind of neighborhood. Yeah. So good for him. So he's actually in the food business now.
My goodness, what an individual! What a Canadian, right? He's an MD, doctor, NFL champion. Now he's a baker. What's left for boy? What an interesting.
Well, I understand. Guy. The strategy is pretty clear. He's going to actually sell some really good bread, make people fat, so that he can actually treat them as an MD. It's great. The circle of life.
I'm going to reach out. Let's see if we can get him on the microphone at Cial. I'm just taking a note right now. That'll be super fun.
Actually, that's a good idea.
Right? That'd be super fun. All right. A bit of a long episode for sure, but we hope you stayed with us because certainly Michael Graydon had a lot of super interesting things to say. And as I said, we'll be back in a couple of weeks with his counterpart, Kim Furlong from Retail Council Canada. So we'll do that. We've got lots of great guests coming up. And of course, we'll be live in Seattle and Montreal coming up soon. So looking forward to see you in a couple of weeks. Until then, my friend, I'm Michael LeBlanc, media entrepreneur. And you are?
And I'm the food professor, Sylvain Charlebois.
Safe travels, everyone.
Take care.